Hello all. So in this lecture we will see about software configuration management. So when we develop software, there are a large set of deliverables for that software project. So it mainly consists of the source code, the design document, the SRS document, the test document, the user's manual. All these are set of deliverables, or these are called objects. So these things will be referred and modified by a number of software developers in the team. So, if any change is made by some person in the team, it should be reflected or it should be seen to other developers of the team. So, for this, we have to properly manage this software configuration. So, otherwise, there will be some problem with that configuration. So configuration, it is a state of all objects or the project deliverables at any point of time is called the configuration of the software product. So it's a state of all the objects at any point of time. We call that configuration of the software product. Then what we have to do is we have to effectively track and control the configuration of the software. So this is known as configuration management. We have to track and control the configuration of a particular software. So today there will be a configuration of the source code. Tomorrow some other developers will change that configuration. So it should be reflected in some common repository. Then only others will see that another developer has made some changes to the program. So before going into software configuration management, we will see what is this revision and version in a software. So version of a software is created when there is a significant change in functionality, technology, or the hardware it runs on. So if we make significant change, then we say that a new version of the software is developed. For example, if we have made a software for Android, and tomorrow we are developing the same software for iOS, then we can say that we are releasing a new version of the software. Then what is this revision? So revision of software refers to minor bug fix in that software. So you are familiar with many apps and you are using many apps, and daily you can see there will be some updates. So these updates are actually revisions of the software to enhance the performance, or if there are some bugs, it will be detected. So new release is created if there is only a bug fix or minor enhancements to the functionality or usability. You are changing the GUI, or you are adding some new themes, then all these are called new releases of that software. So that's the difference between version and revision of the software. So usually the version M software, you will be using some WhatsApp 14, and there will be some release 14.1, and there will be sub releases also. If there are minor changes to the previous software, it will be 14.1.1, like that it will go on. So why do we require this software configuration management? So there are several things that why we have to see why this software configuration is important in software engineering. So first thing is there is inconsistency problem when the objects are replicated. So for example, we will take one of the objects, source code. It's an object that should be properly configured. So if a developer makes changes to his local copy of that software, so that software source code will be used by many developers. If a particular developer takes that copy of that software, and if he makes that changes, if he makes some changes to that software, then he should immediately intimate the changes that he has made to other developers. Then only they can also change the other parts of the software which those developers have developed. So he has to intimate the others also if he had made some changes. But if he forgets to intimate the teammates about the changes, then there will be some problem, or there will be inconsistency will be there. Because if we try to integrate different modules, then this inconsistency will remain. For example, if I am writing a function which has two parameters and later I am adding a third parameter in my module and I am not intimating it to some other person, some other module developer, and that developer doesn't know that I have made this change. Then when he calls that function, he will call the function using two parameters. So when we integrate that software, that problem will occur. So this is known as inconsistency problem when the objects are replicated. That is, when we make duplicate copies of the same object. Then another necessity is that problems associated with concurrent access. So there is always concurrent access among these derivable objects. So if there is some strict discipline is maintained for updation and storage of these objects, several problems can come. For example, two developers are making some changes to a particular SRS document. They are not aware. Each developer may not be aware that he is making the other person is making some change. So they both together will be making some changes to the SRS, or they both together might be making some changes to the soft source code. Then the problem is that they won't be knowing that the other person has made some change, and the other person will not know that this person has made some change. So it's a problem with concurrent access. Then what happens is they will overwrite each other. Okay, that is another problem associated with this concurrent access. If there is no proper configuration management, then there will be a problem with this concurrent access. Then third necessary is we have to provide a stable development environment. So when we have to provide a stable development environment. So if there are many number of developers in a project, and if a module A is used by, maybe developed by a person, and it might be integrating with other modules like B and C. So if the module C developer keeps on changing and the module A developer doesn't know about those changes, then there will be some problem with the thing. So it won't be stable. So when we try to integrate and all these things, it won't be stable. We have to recompile all these modules, then only we can reflect these changes. So we need to have a configuration control over that thing. Then another necessity is that if system accounting and maintaining status information, that is also important, because whenever a particular change is made, we have to note down who has made that change, why did he make that change, when did he make that change. All these things should be noted. For system accounting and maintaining status also, we require this configuration management. Then another necessity is that when we want to handle variants of the software, so there will be different versions and revisions of the software. So if we want to manage all these versions and revisions of the software, then proper software configuration management is needed. Otherwise, who has fixed this, what all bug fixes we have made in the previous configuration or previous version, what we have made changes, or the current version, what we have fixed, all these things will be unknown to other persons. So in order to maintain this, we have to make a proper software configuration management. So we will see the software configuration management activities. Mainly we have two activities in software configuration. First one is configuration identification. So it involves deciding which all things that should be configured, or which all things should be tracked. Then second part is configuration control. So this ensures how the system will perform smoothly. Okay. So the software project manager has to do both these activities. He has to identify the configuration management objects, and also he need to control the configuration. So we will see each one. First one is configuration identification. So here what the project manager does is he has to classify the objects associated with that software into three categories. First one is controlled, second one is pre-controlled, and third one is uncontrolled. So controlled objects are those objects which are already put under configuration control. So these objects are already put under configuration control. Then we have pre-controlled objects, and these are not yet under configuration control, but will eventually be under configuration control in the later stages. Then third type of object that will be there is the uncontrolled object. So these objects are not at all subject to any configuration control, are not and will not be subjected to any configuration control. These are called uncontrolled objects. Then controllable objects are there. So it includes both controlled and pre-controlled objects. So these are known as controllable objects. So these controllable objects will be, all these will belong to this controllable objects. Requirement specification document, that is SRS document, design documents, then the tools used to build the system such as compilers, linkers, lexical analysis, parsers, etc. all belong to this. Then source code for each module, then test cases, the problem reports, all these things will be considered as controllable objects. So next, second step is, after identifying this objects, then second step is configuration control. So how to control this configuration? So it is a process of managing changes to controlled objects. So we have already seen what are controlled objects. It's a process of managing changes to these controlled objects. So what all changes, which person, when they have made these changes, it should be managed. So that is meant by configuration control. So it directly affects the day-to-day operations of developers. So the main essential idea for this configuration control is to prevent unauthorized changes to any controlled objects, or configuration control allows authorized changes to controlled objects. We will allow authorized changes to controlled objects, then it is known as configuration control. So we will see an example how this happens, how this configuration management happens, or how this configuration control is done in software system. So for example, this is the baseline. So this is the baseline. So baseline of something. So baseline, it is actually a baseline is the status of all objects under configuration control. So it is the status, it is a current status. So baseline defines the current status of all the objects that are put under control. So these are the different objects A, B, C, D, like there are different objects that are controlled. So this is the baseline. Now a person wants this C, he needs to change that object. So he needs to modify this object. So what he does is, he will reserve it. A person has to reserve that object. So these are all controlled objects. So C, he wants that, this person wants that C object, and he needs to modify that. What he has to do is, he has to reserve that object. So he has to reserve that object, then he will get a private copy of that object, and this will be reserved. So if some other person tries to access this object, it won't be allowed. That person won't be allowed to access the object because it is already been reserved by some person. It's like a book lending system in your library. So if you are accessing some book, and if you are given access to a particular book, others won't be allowed to use that book. So similarly, if C is an object that is reserved by a particular person, he will get a copy of that object. He will just get the copy of that object, and after that he can make all the changes, and after making all those changes, he will give it to the CCB, that is the change control board. There is a change control board will be there. It may be a group of developers, or it may be the project manager itself. So there will be a change control board. We call it a board. We call it a CCB, change control board. So what they do is, after making these changes, he has to submit that copy to the change control board. Then the change control board will see whether it should be restored or it should be rejected. So if that changes has to be rejected or not will be decided by the change control board. So if those changes are accepted by CCB, then a new baseline will be created, and that copy C dash will be done. So C will be removed and C dash will be done. So it will be a restore option. Now, if some other person want, he can again access this copy. So this is the restore, reserve and restore operation that is happening in configuration control. So what the CCB will do, so CCB has to review what the changes has made. So CCB may be the project manager or it may be a set of developers. So what they will do is they will check all these things. First they will see whether the change is well motivated. The user has done a well motivated change. Then the developer has, the CCB will check whether the developer has considered and documented the effects of those change. Then the CCB will check whether the changes interact well with the changes made by other developers. If we have changed some module, if that module is interacting with some other modules, whether there will be any problem with that interface and all this will be checked by the CCB. Then after that, the CCB, this will be reflected only after the appropriate people or the CCB have validated that change. Whether that CCB has validated that change, then it will be reflected in the baseline. A new baseline will be created. So for example, what this validation is, if for example someone has tested the changed code and has verified that the change is consistent with the requirement. So someone will have to test the changed code and has verified that the change is consistent with the requirement. The CCB will verify that and then it will be validated. So this is how configuration control happens. So all controlled objects will be done by this mechanism. Then there are several configuration management tools also available. There are two tools that are available. One is software code control system. It is known as SCCS, and there is revision control system also, RCS. So these are the two popular tools that are used. Whatever modules, it will be automatically numbered. A version, release, everything can be numbered accordingly, like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, like that it will be. So there are the various configuration management tools that are available for this thing. So that's all about configuration management. Thank you.